They thought he was coming back to break something. That was the rumor. After 23 years of opening the same hardware store at 6:10 every morning, wiping down the same counter with the same gray rag, and drinking coffee that always tasted a little like burnt pennies, they let him go in 12 minutes. 12. Not even enough time for the coffee in his paper cup to cool. He stood there with his name tag still pinned to his chest. Walter. Blue letters. Scratched plastic. The kind of tag you stop feeling on your shirt after a few decades. The owner's son did the talking. That tells you everything already. Kids who inherited polished desks always love words like restructure and efficiency. Makes an old man's rent sound like a spreadsheet problem. Walter didn't yell. That was what bothered them. He just nodded once, took the little framed photo of his wife from the shelf behind the register, and picked up the brown lunch bag he'd brought from home. Turkey sandwich, apple, half a sleeve of saltines. Same lunch for years. One of the younger cashiers told me later that Walter looked almost polite walking out, like he was apologizing for making people uncomfortable with his age. Funny, isn't it? A man gives a place half his life, and on the way out, he still tries not to be inconvenient. I knew Walter because our daughters used to do school choir together, back when camcorders still ate those little VHS-C tapes. You remember that sound. The click when you shoved one into the adapter. The static on an old television. Kids singing off-key in paper angel wings under fluorescent lights. Walter was already tired back then. Not lazy tired, life tired. The kind where your lower back hurts before your feet hit the floor. His wife, Marlene, had bad knees and worse insurance. His mother lived with them too, in the room by the kitchen, where the window stuck in summer and let cold air in during January. She watched game shows with the volume up too high and kept butterscotch candies in her cardigan pocket like it was still 1994. Walter had a grown son who called when he needed something, and a daughter, Amy, who was trying to finish nursing school while raising a little boy with asthma. So when they fired Walter, they didn't just fire a man. They shook loose a whole shelf of people leaning on him. That first week, he didn't say much. Men our age don't always have language for humiliation. We've got language for bills, for tire pressure, for blood sugar, for school pickup, for Dad's appointment got moved to Thursday. But humiliation, that one just sits in the chest like dry bread. I saw him one Tuesday morning at the diner off Route 8, same booth near the window, same hands around the mug, hands like split oak. He was staring out at the parking lot where his old truck sat crooked between the lines, rust blooming above the wheel well. I sat down across from him without asking. At our age, that counts as affection. He smiled a little, not because he was happy, because he was too worn out not to. "You hear?" he asked. "Everybody heard," I said. He nodded. The waitress topped off his coffee and called him honey, like women in diners do when a man looks like he's running low on whatever keeps him upright. Walter took a breath, said, "They think I'm gonna get even." I looked at him. He shrugged. "Maybe I thought that too. First night." He told me he'd sat in his driveway after they fired him, long after dark, with the engine off and the groceries sweating in the back seat. A gallon of milk, frozen peas, cheap ham, bread crushing under a sack of potatoes. Didn't go inside right away. Couldn't. Because once he walked through that front door, he'd have to say it out loud. And there's something about saying bad news in your own kitchen, under the hum of the refrigerator, while a pot with a loose handle rattles on the stove, that makes it real in a crueler way. Marlene took it quietly. That was worse than crying. She just sat down, folded the dish towel in half, then in half again, and asked whether they were paying out his unused vacation days. That's marriage after enough years. Nobody has energy for speeches. You go straight to the math. A few days later, Walter found out the owner's son had posted online about moving the store into the future. Clean shelves, bright paint, new systems, a smiling photo with the younger staff. Walter wasn't in any of those pictures, of course. Men like Walter built half this country and disappeared from the brochure. That was when people started waiting for the revenge. They expected slashed tires, a broken front window, maybe a screaming match in the parking lot. One guy even swore he saw Walter drive past the store 3 times one evening, which might have been true. When you lose a place you've belonged to that long, your body goes back before your pride catches up. Like a dog wandering to a porch where somebody used to feed him. What they didn't know was that Walter had something else in mind. Not because he was noble, not because he had some saintly patience the rest of us lack. He was angry, good and angry, the kind that makes your jaw ache in your sleep. But anger changes shape when you're responsible for too many people. At 25, revenge looks like gasoline and dumb ideas. At 45, revenge has to fit between pharmacy pickups and overdue electric bills. So Walter did what men like him do. He kept moving. He started driving early mornings for a restaurant supply company. Boxes of frozen fries, industrial ketchup, 20-pound bags of flour that left white dust on his jeans. By noon, he was helping Amy with her boy. Nebulizer treatments, cartoons, crumbs in the couch. By evening, he was sitting with his mother while she told the same story about a Philco radio her father kept in the garage. How on summer nights, the baseball game would crackle through the speaker while moths beat themselves silly against the porch light. Walter let her tell it every time. Maybe because some sounds are better than answers. Months passed. Then winter came. The hard, ugly kind. Parking lots the color of old dishwater. Wind that gets under your coat and turns every errand personal. One Friday afternoon, Amy's little boy had an attack bad enough to send them all to St. Catherine's. Walter met them there straight from work, still wearing his back brace under his flannel. Hospitals at night all smell the same. Coffee, bleach, worry. The kid was all right after a while. Sleeping. Machine beeping steady. Amy went to make a phone call. Walter stepped into the hallway to stretch his legs. That was where he saw him. The owner's son, Derek. The haircut, the wool coat, the clean shoes of a man who has never had to choose between gas and groceries. He was standing by the vending machines with both hands on the back of his neck, looking like someone had unplugged him. Walter almost kept walking. Would have been understandable. Would have even felt fair. But then he saw a little girl in a pink sweatshirt curled across 3 plastic chairs, and a woman crying quietly into a paper mask. Derek looked up, saw Walter, and you could tell, right there, he knew exactly who was standing in front of him. Life has a mean sense of timing. Derek's father had collapsed at home. Stroke, maybe. They weren't sure yet. The old man had handled most of the store finances himself, and now payroll was due Monday. Systems were locked. Vendors were waiting. Employees were already nervous. Derek, for all his tidy language and management phrases, didn't know how half the place actually worked. Because men like Derek call it running a business, when other people carry the weight. Walter listened, said nothing at first, just stood there with his coat half-zipped and hospital wristbands still dangling from where he'd signed in for his grandson. Derek looked sick with shame. Good. Some shame is overdue mail. "I know I got no right," Derek said. "But if payroll doesn't go through, those kids at the store, they miss rent. I don't know the vendor codes. I don't know the old accounts. My dad kept all of it in his office, and some of it's still on paper." Walter looked past him at the little girl sleeping on the chairs, then at the woman wiping her face, then back at Derek. Later, people would call what happened mercy. I don't know if that's the word. Mercy sounds cleaner than real life. Real life is usually heavier than that. Walter said, "You still use the green ledger?" Derek blinked. "Yeah." "Combination on the bottom file cabinet still your dad's Marine number?" Derek stared at him. Walter rubbed a hand over his mouth. Tired. Annoyed to even know the answers. Then he said, "Get me a pen." That was his revenge. He didn't smash the store. He made sure the young cashier with twins got paid on time. He made sure the night stock boy didn't bounce his rent check. He sat in a hospital hallway under bad lights and wrote out every account number, every vendor contact, every shortcut the old system depended on. He drew maps, left notes, explained which freezer stuck if the back door swelled in the rain, which supplier lied about delivery times, which register jammed if you breathed on it wrong. Derek kept saying thank you. Walter finally told him to stop, not out of generosity, out of fatigue. There's a point in middle age where you don't forgive people because they deserve it. You do it because carrying them any farther would throw out your back. A week later, Derek came by Walter's house. No coat and tie performance, just a plain jacket and an envelope. He offered Walter his job back, higher pay, full benefits, respect this time, supposedly. Walter looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. Marlene was inside making soup. You could smell celery and black pepper through the screen door. His mother was in the living room, asleep in her chair with an Afghan over her knees. The grandson's inhaler sat on the side table next to a little pile of crayons. Walter said, "No." Derek looked confused, maybe even hurt. Funny again, as if kindness had purchased access. Walter told him he'd help train the new people for a month. Contract work, morning hours only. Then he was done. Derek asked why. Walter stood there a moment, one hand on the doorframe, looking older than I remembered, and stronger too. He said, "Because I already gave that place my knees. I'm not giving it what years I got left." That's all. No speech, no grand exit, just a man deciding where the rest of him would be spent. Now and then I still see Walter at the diner. He looks about the same, maybe a little lighter around the eyes, still tired. At our age, tired doesn't leave, it just learns some manners. Last month, he pulled the little cassette case out of his coat pocket. Can you imagine that? A real cassette case. Cloudy plastic, cracked hinge. Inside was an old tape Marlene had found in a drawer. Amy's choir concert from 1997. He laughed when he showed me. Said they didn't even own anything that could play it anymore. Then he turned it over in his hands for a second, quiet as church, and said, "Funny what survives." I knew what he meant. Not the tape. Not really. Some men wait their whole lives to get even. Some just get tired of being owned. And some nights, sitting there with stale pie in a glass case and coffee gone lukewarm between us, I think the deepest cut Walter ever made wasn't to Derek's pride. It was refusing to become the ugly thing they had prepared themselves to recognize. That kind of revenge leaves a mark people keep finding years later. Usually when they're alone. Usually when the room is finally quiet enough to hear it.